You can say that again. Not yet. Certainly, certainly. Doing pretty good personally. I don't want to mention the state of affairs, but um, yeah, nothing really to complain about. Finished up the work week, getting ready for the weekend and some Pathfinder.
I just realized I was on mute. Okay, great. Anyways, for those who didn't hear this lovely, lovely title, I am joined by none other than Matthew. He is a co-owner in Eldritch Osiris Games, a company I think I partially own now. I don't know. I've divided it so many times around. Anyways, he has written not only the Ironclad class, one that I am particularly very, very proud of, but also the Inquisitor class was the first collaboration that we managed to work together on, I believe, and
Yeah,
is
yeah,
doing
back
some
in
great
February. Yeah.
stuff for Eldritch Osiris Games in the background. I know there's a particular project that you're particularly working on.
Yes.
I am super excited to see where that goes, but all around,
As am I.
I so I brought you here today because you're one of the best people I know when it comes to class design. Granted, we have our disagreements
Thank you.
in a few places, but I
Of
think
course, it's
overall,
natural.
I think overall you're kind of my go-to. If Sean's busy with something, I will constantly berate you with new ideas. But that's
That
kind
is
of
an amazing compliment. Thank you very much.
But yeah, from what I've seen of not only your Inquisitor breakdown, which you guys can find over on Pathfinder Infinite, or on Comatt's channel, uh, it wasn't only that. It was we've talked in behind the scenes about class design and class approach. My first introduction to you was actually a review of Psychic, and you absolutely. I wouldn't say
I
not give
thrashed
kind
it,
words,
dude.
but trashed
I
it. Yes.
thrashed it. Oh yeah,
uh,
they were not kind words, I will tell you that. But I am very much excited to see the changes that they made. Uh,
yeah, Dark
moving forward
Archive
with the Dark
sounds.
Archive, I'm very excited.
Yeah, are you looking forward to anything in particular from Dark Archive, or is it?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
they
what are you
implemented a
thinking?
bunch of more implements for the thaumaturge, so I really do want to see how that shakes up. I wasn't too keen on it in the very beginning. I think detaching itself, with recall knowledge, while still having it in there. I think I'd imagine the tome implement is going to be about recall knowledge, but detaching the full chassis and one of their key abilities from recall knowledge is something that I did want to see because it did feel a bit awkward to me at the beginning, but I have high hopes for the final product.
Yeah, I think that with playtests in particular, they're kind of trying to hit as many bases as possible. And from what I've seen of Dark Archive, meaning whatever Paizo has openly said, not like I get anything early these days. But yeah, I'm particularly excited for just seeing some of the more weirder archetypes come out. But we talked with In Profit, someone else who's partnered with Eldritch Osiris Games. God, I know so many people now. We talked about bloat last week, but I feel like classes are in this very unique category where you're not really going to see too much bloat from at least the Paizo side of it all. What is your current take on how classes have managed to be developed over the last 4 years of Pathfinder?
Sure, I really do think it comes down to identity and what makes each class stand out from all the rest. Going all the way back to the playtest, the Paizo decided to separate the strengths and weaknesses of the fighter and the champion. Back in Pathfinder 1, fighter and paladin were pretty, dare I say, generic.
A little bit, yeah.
Giving them true identities, with fighter being the weapon masters and champions being the defense masters, really did bring them each into their own, unique spaces. And I think that with all of the classes that they have released up to this point, they've been following suit. So I think that each class has a very distinct identity associated with it, and having those identities are important moving forward. There's a lot of archetypes out there that can take, some of the smaller subsections, such as like archer or medic. But I think when it comes to building a class, Paizo really wants them to feel unique.
Would you say this is kind of an improvement over first edition? Because I've been reading through like the advanced class guide, and a lot of these hybrid classes
hybrid classes, yes.
Yeah, a lot of them are. This is a very niche thing that we want to like maybe cover, and I'm excluding the Slayer class from this because it's Rogue Ranger Fighter just in one class. It's not really unique at identity. Do you think now having a 2 to 4 release a year class is going to kind of help Pathfinder 2nd edition, or do you think it's going to make it more and more of a struggle later down the line for Paizo to be implementing new changes?
I really like all of the classes so far that they've put out, with a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, they've been really good about it. I would much rather see a slow trickle of classes and a bunch more content about, say, Galarian, about, say, items and equipment and, skill feats, general feats. I don't mind that they're slowing down with classes because they do take a long time to develop. And like I said before, they do need to feel unique. So a lot of, the hybrid classes from Pathfinder 1 did get sucked up into some of the other classes that we have right now. I have no doubt in my mind that Hunter isn't coming back. War Priest already got sucked up into Cleric. I already said Hunter. War Priest isn't coming back. I just said War Priest too. What was the other one I was thinking of?
Blood
Arcanist.
Rager, Arcanist. Yeah, well, Arcanist kind of already came back with Flexible Prepared Caster, but I know that they were trying to. It's not kind of the same dimensional reservoir that it was in first edition, which was a lot more magic manipulation-y.
I was going to say Brawler. That was the one. That one's not coming back. Sorry, Archon.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of where third party does a great job of like coming in and, just like, hey, if this is a specific niche that we know Paizo's not going to do, here's us. And so I kind of want to jump back and forth between the Paizo and then your own experience with this. So I won't talk about Inquisitor because we've seen 30 renditions of Inquisitor, but actually the Ironclad, which was a unique approach to playing tanks in second edition. Can you tell us a little bit about that class and why you think maybe this is something Paizo hasn't filled yet, or where you think what was your kind of direction going into the class?
Sure. So when I first was thinking about the class, I had to consider what was already out there on the market. So the 4 areas where, Ironclad sort of falls in between are Fighter, Champion. Excuse me.
Oh, the cough class was my favorite class. Easily. Hands down.
For sure. You spread all that sickened condition everywhere, right? And then the 2 archetypes, I think it's Sentinel and Bastion. Those were the 4, circles that I had to fill in. And after I made that Venn diagram, I needed to come up with that little overlap in the design space that the Ironclad resides in. And when designing it, what my issue with the Champion, and I think the Champion is a fantastic class. I think they're top tier. They're in my top 3 of like best classes in Pathfinder 2nd edition. But one of the issues, and it's a very small issue that I have with it, is their lack of a hard taunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what the Ironclad gives is that ability with Interpose. They can immediately take an attack directed at an adjacent ally, and the attack instead of giving like your ally a bonus to resistance or AC or something, they just take the attack for you. And I think that was, sort of the linchpin around how I designed the Ironclad.
So, how many classes, or specifically archetypes, are filling in this multi-gap role? Because you said you're balancing not only the fighter champion, but also the two archetypes of Bastion and Sentinel. Do you see other classes kind of doing this already? Such as the monk with martial artist archetype, or so on and so forth?
Well, monk came out before martial artist, so that is something to consider. I think like something like archer or eldritch archer, or maybe eldritch archer is the better example here, because that one did precede the magus, and that did give characters the ability to spell strike. It's not spell strike, but let's be real here, it's spell strike.
Yeah, it's spell strike, but quite literally a name.
Yeah. The other one I did want to talk about was Beastmaster. I've always been a fan of that, style of play, those kinds of characters. So while I was working in core, I realized that I couldn't do that. Well, you could, it's just kind of weak, and it only comes online at later levels. Because the Druid dedication will only give you the Animal Companion at like level 4, and the advancements are at like level 8 and 16. And you can't get specialized. So Beastmaster was a fantastic addition, in my opinion, because it allowed you to get an Animal Companion on par with the Druid, which is kind of ridiculous, but it felt good. I'm not gonna lie.
So, at what point do you reach where a archetype becomes a class? Because I could see arguments for Gunslinger being an archetype instead of the full class it's at now. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the way Gunslinger is running right now. I love playing with it. But, classes such as Cavalier and Vigilante, which were originally first edition classes, are now archetypes.
I think it depends on a few things. I think first and foremost, it depends on what the people want, right? I feel like if there's enough demand for something to be implemented as a class, Paizo will do it. But on the other hand, it depends on kind of what we were saying before about the design space and how well does it fit, right? So with Vigilante, I did enjoy seeing it as an archetype because now any character can just be a Vigilante. Like, you could be a Vigilante wizard if you wanted to be. You could be a Vigilante fighter. And it wasn't just, Vigilante, and then there were a whole bunch of feat. And this isn't first edition. There were like 2 different sets of feat, which I believe was what inspired the split between skill feats and class feats, right? Because the Vigilante had a bunch of like Vigilante feats and then a bunch of social feats. And seeing that split was pretty cool, but at the same time, it felt very clunky to me back in the day. So, which is why I've never played one, sadly.
So, kind of like to recap your point here, it's when the theme is lost on the class, or it's just not filling in the specific role that it was trying to be. Because Cavalier is focusing a lot on having a mounted animal companion, but a little bit more in first edition, it was about what order you served. Oh yeah, by the way, here's your animal companion.
Right. I think the other issue is how much sense does it make within an adventure path? Paizo publishes a lot of those. Excuse me. And it has to at least some degree make sense. So if you're playing in a dungeon crawl where the hallways are 5 foot wide and you want to play a cavalier with a 10-foot wide horse, it's not going to work very well, or you're going to be forced into playing, a small character with a medium-sized mount. But wait a minute, mature animal companion always increases your size, so you end up in that situation regardless. So I think that has to come into play as well when designing these sorts of things.
So why wasn't something like Ironclad kind of a combination between the Bastion Sentinel and then maybe like the fighter archetype? Like, could it be where it was, you're getting Interpros as part of the dedication, and then you just stack it full of a few unique feats. At what point did you say this should be a full class?
I think because it wants to do two things at once. It wants to have a lot of armor, and it wants to have a shield. And there's nothing so far that has both of them together at the same time. I guess you could say that if you just combine Bastion and Sentinel into one, then there you have it. But I think Ironclad goes a little bit further with that in that regard because of a set of feats that I implemented pretty late into the design process, but I'm glad they're there, and they're called reinforcements. I actually wasn't aware that armor adjustments were a thing because I don't own the Grand Bazaar and really didn't look at the Grand Bazaar. So that was a bit of an oversight on my part, but I was like, wait a minute, why couldn't you be like a character like Rook from Rainbow Six Siege, where he just gives all of your allies and himself an extra armor plate that increases the amount of damage you can take? What if I took that idea and then changed it such that they could get a whole bunch of different, defensive effects without actually have to invest their reaction to do so? So a feat like Insulating Overcoat, which is a reinforcement that I had, reduces the damage that you take from either cold, fire, electricity damage, and as an added effect, because it's an insulator, your armor is no longer considered to be metal.
Gotcha. So when you see Paizo kind of releasing these archetypes in mass expansion, have you ever seen one and gone, okay, that should have been a full class, maybe just because the concept was just so unique? Or do you feel like what Paizo has been doing is kind of the right track of where second edition should be going?
I definitely agree with Paizo on this one. I don't, off the top of my mind, I can only think of one archetype that I believe would be fitting of a full class, and to me, that's Marshal. I think that Warlord-esque style of gameplay, where you're not necessarily a bard, because yes, Warrior Bard fills that role very well, but I think decoupling, the occult spellcasting and just making them like a full martial with martial powers is something that is desired not only by me, but I think a lot of people within the community are yearning for that sort of experience as well. And Martial does a lot of great things. It's probably my second favorite archetype behind Beastmaster. I think it fits on a lot of classes, including Bard, very well. Its prerequisites to enter are really low. Training in diplomacy or intimidation, that's nothing. The dedication itself is great. It gives you a skill increase, and then the auras that it gives the stance feats are just chef's kiss. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So what's to be said about something like in D&D 4th edition, because that had a warlord class built into its core design. I believe it was actually in the player's handbook, if I remember. It's been a while since I've looked at the 4E handbook. I will fully admit that.
I've never looked at it.
It's an interesting design read. They were trying something new. It clearly, a large sect of the fan base said, we want 3.5, and then, I can spiel on about the Paizo lore history here. But what do you feel about going back into other, editions of the game and bringing stuff like the Warlord into 2nd edition? Do you see a level of modularity here, or do you see this being particularly difficult? Because you brought back Inquisitor into 2nd edition. That was your first product with Eldritch Osiris Games before we recalled that very lovely name.
Right. I think it depends, again, on design space. So a lot of the classes that have left to been ported from Pathfinder 1 are already in the system, or can more or less be flavored to fit it. So I think really the only couple of classes left, as we said before, are Inquisitor and then something like Kineticist. I believe there is a Kineticist already out there in Pathfinder Infinite. It is excellent.
Oh my god, it's such a good read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're not sponsored, by the way.
Going back to... But going back to the original question, is it good to look back at previous editions and kind of, take stuff from them? I definitely would say that it's worth, at the very least, considering. There are a lot of things that, that we've done right in previous editions, and maybe it's how the edition was structured that it might be more difficult to port over. Like, say, with the Kineticist, you have to import over Burn. How would you make that work, for instance? Of course, you say, "Oh, they're just drained," but some people might agree, some people might disagree. I personally have no horse in the race, so you won't get any opinion from me.
There goes our hot take of clip chipping.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think that looking back at previous editions to take ideas from is just golden. I don't see any downside to doing so, other than the time that you spend on it. But they're already out there; they're there for you to use. So why not use it?
Do you think that there's anything we could particularly learn from previous editions? Like, first edition brought in a lot of new content for the 3.5 system, which was the juggernaut of, I would say, the 2000s until the 2010s when 5th edition rolled out and, the 2nd edition did. Is there any particular lessons? Because I didn't play much of 1st edition without getting lost or having to homebrew it into meta Starfighter rules.
Sure. I think that getting feedback from the community is really important here. So listening to the people that play this game, talking about what they like versus what they don't like, and then, taking the stuff that they like and then pushing it forward. So what Pathfinder 1 did was they had a whole bunch of rules about a whole bunch of crap. And then we can talk about finesse weapons and why you would need a feat in order to be able to use, Dex to attack mods. Thus was invented the elephant in the rules feat tax, which solved a bunch of issues, but it made us cognizant of all of the issues that base Pathfinder has. Moving that into 2nd edition, finesse is now just a quality that you can just slap on a weapon. Rapier has finesse. Shortsword has finesse. You can just use your dexterity modifier to attack rolls without actually having to invest in a feat or have a class feature that lets you do that.
So, I'm going to keep bugging you about 1st edition just because you've now kind of piqued my curiosity here.
Mm-hmm.
So going from, let's just say, the core rulebook of 1st edition, right? So you have Paladin class and then transitioning that into what we're seeing with 2nd edition here. What do you think that Paizo's absolutely done right besides saying the words 3-action economy?
I think what I really do think is removing perception from the skills that you have to invest in. I think that tying perception to your class is a very interesting take that I don't think a lot of developers would have been keen on. But I was very happy to see that. And tying this into Pathfinder Infinite and a bunch of homebrew classes, I think that a lot of people undervalue perception. Both, when I built the Inquisitor and the Ironclad, I made sure to give them expert perception and then get them the master. I see so many classes that just have trained perception, expert at 7, or something along those lines. And I want to see, dude. I want to play this class, but I have to see. I remember talking with Archon about the Warlord, and they started out trained in perception. And I'm like, you're a battlefield commander. You're only trained? Why aren't you expert? Why aren't you getting something like Battlefield Surveyor like the fighter does? They did end up getting to master. I think he had expert at 3 or something, so I just told him to throw it into the base chassis, because that is a no-no if you start out trained as a in perception or a saving throw. Based on Paizo's rules, I say rules in air quotes because they haven't made a statement about this, but if you take a look, any class that starts out with trained in either perception or a saving throw never gets past expert. So that is something, to keep in mind when we're talking about class development, that sort of thing. So, what was your original question?
Oh, something no,
what did I like?
No, I really like this. Okay, so let's start getting into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the classes. So like you said, that there are certain rules that Paizo will follow. Obviously, certain spellcasters cannot get their armor up to, beyond expert. Some classes like the Alchemist fit a little bit more in the utility, weird metasphere of abilities. What are some common rules that people should keep in mind here as they are either developing or just things to actively look out for when reading through a class?
Sure. I want to go back to your last question for 1 second because I thought of a better answer. Max hit points at every level, baby. That's what I love. I saw that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I was like, I'm sold. That's it. Time to move on. But is this one like choosing a class that has already been released, like first party content, or when
let's talk about first party content first. Let's talk about what Paizo's actively thinking about. I don't want to say it's the secrets that Paizo won't say out loud, but it's kind of like the bread and butter of design in 2nd edition. They're all kind of following a same linear pattern. What's kind of your things that you first notice, let's just say, when you're combing over, champion or fighter, something along those lines?
Base proficiencies. Before I even look at the class features, before I even look at the class feats, I take a look at their proficiencies. And I feel like, in general, people underrate this sort of thing. And what I really feel people underrate is at what point each class gets this proficiency. So let's take Rogue, for instance. They start out with Expert Will saves at level 1, but they don't get to Master until 17. So that's 16 levels where they're just sitting at Expert, which is not necessarily bad. But to say, just to use the blanket statement, Rogues get, Master and Will save, that's at level 17. Clerics are getting that at 9. Or, what's a better example? I guess Investigators are getting that at, 9. So they'll have Master for 8 levels before you get there, and of course Investigators get legendary will saves. I think a lot of people, when they first saw the Thaumaturge, they saw that level 13 legendary will save. That's never been done before. They were like, oh shit, that's nice. And they're right, it is very nice to get such a powerful ability. And even though it's only numbers, it's just a flat numerical increase. And then, of course, you have, the effect of crit fail becoming a fail, half damage on a fail.
Yeah.
But just to see that power spike occurring, is something that I consider very much highly. So whenever I talk about the Alchemist, because that discussion will never die, I always approach it from the matter of base proficiencies. Their perception is horrible. Their will save is the worst in the game because they started off as trained and they have to wait till level 7 to get it to expert. Every other class either starts with it at expert or at the very worst gets it at level 3. That's fighter and ranger, I believe. So there's that. Their weapon proficiencies we don't need to talk about. That's been beaten to death already. Their armor is average, right? But again, going back to perception, their perception is trained. And they get expert at what, 9? It's
I remember it's being
pretty late.
Yeah,
it's not as late as Inventor. I don't know what they were doing with that, but level 9 for perception. That's awful. Your initiatives are going to be so bad unless you go into your skills, invest heavily into stealth, which is not necessarily a bad thing because Alchemist usually goes to Dexter anyways. But you have to invest these skill increases that you may or may not be going out of your way to do in order to compensate for some abilities and features that I just wish were part of the base kit.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying there. And, obviously I don't want to beat the dead horse of talking about the Alchemist class, but is there an argument that their class features outweigh the proficiencies here? Because eventually, I'm looking it up now. I don't remember at what, 7th level, they're getting perpetual infusions where they're going to create a near infinite supply of potions. At what point do you balance proficiency with let's just say, a particularly powerful ability? Because I know eventually, I've built Alchemist where I've had infinite amount of potions a day. The point when I was doing math for how many potions I got, I just got really, really tired of looking at an Excel sheet. just because I was being, I will fully admit, I was being particularly annoying with just trying to calculate the sheer range of things I could do with this character.
Right. So I might be the worst person to ask this question to.
Oh, I know. This is why I brought you here. I need the
like
clickbait.
big numbers, and I like when the big numbers get bigger.
Yeah.
But I think there is something to be said about class features, but when you take away a proficiency, that feature has to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So if you have... So I don't even know what another example... I guess the Alchemist is the only example where you've been removed proficiencies because they're not a spellcaster, but their weapon expertise only gets to expert. They don't get greater weapon specialization.
They're not quite a spellcaster, but they're not quite a martial. I think
they're in this weird in-between space.
They're a utilized support class. I feel like that's what they are, where you can somewhat dip into like a little bit more of a martial side with Mutagenist and Bomber, or you could play, utility with like Toxicologist or Cryogen if you wanted to go more support. I'm never going to pronounce that word right.
We don't speak about that one.
That one is, I believe, getting a rewrite at some point.
Right. I'm very happy to see that. I honestly was kind of hoping that you were doing that for a bit, where you just say toxicologist and just ignore chirurgeon. But
it's a support somewhere.
Yeah. Perpetual infusions is nice, but you have to realize that these elixirs are coming in at level 1, and you can't choose elixir of life. So the bombs that you have are dealing insanely mediocre damage. I will say that this whole it's really good against weaknesses. There are not really that many enemies that have weaknesses, unless you're in a homebrew campaign where the GM is nice enough to do that. I am a psychopath, and I went through all 6 books of Age of Ashes to see how many enemies actually had weaknesses in the book, and it only came out at like 1 in 6. And a good majority of those came in the last 3 books. And once you get to book 5, everything's weak to cold and good. So if you have, any martial with a frost rune and a holy rune, you're already hitting those weaknesses. So I get it that persistent damage really does add up, but I think there is merit in saying that you really would rather have these accuracy bonuses, because Age of Ashes is not an easy campaign by any stretch of the imagination. So having these flat numerical bonuses is, in my opinion, and in my experience, because I've completed Age of Ashes, I played a champion of Iomade. That was really fun. But to just have the raw numbers at your side is just something that you can always fall back on and always rely on. You don't need to be in a good situation for this to have, a positive effect.
Okay, I think I understand your, at least, argument here, or at least your opinion on it. I won't press too much on it. I agree with you in a sense that I like big numbers, and when big number means crit, I deal a lot of damage. I think that's something 2nd edition has done really, really well, which was capitalizing on crits. But I have always kind of been of the opinion here, this is particularly why I wanted to talk to you about it, is that the DPS side of the class, oh my god, the perpetual, damn it, why am I forgetting the base P word of persistent? Jesus Christ. Yeah, that thing. The persistent damage lasting longer and longer, because there are, let's just say Tanglefoot bag, and I'm going to keep the Cryogen completely out of this discussion here. You have stuff like Tanglefoot bags, which will reduce speed over time, or flat out reduce it. You have
Tanglefoot bag. The greater version at like level 11 is really good. Like it's kind of pretty bad early on, but those later versions start to really stack up. And the Alchemist, after reviewing everything, they're a late bloomer, but they can do a lot down the road. It's just that playing one like levels 1 through 4, it's pain. It's real pain.
I think that's kind of why they're revisiting it, I guess, in Treasure Vault. but kind of centering back on the discussion a little bit more on to the creation side of second edition here. At what point do you feel that a particular, let's just say, proficiency adjustment will outweigh the benefits of a class feature? Have you ever run into that kind of into that issue when creating a class, for instance, such as Ironclad or Inquisitor?
Sure. Let me talk about Ironclad because I have a lot of things to say about it. When I designed, so going back to class features, it's really hard to gauge the power of a class feature when evaluating it in a vacuum. And if you're just in a this is pre-playtest, and I'm so grateful that Paizo has these playtests where we the community can judge and evaluate these powers before this gets actually printed. So I'm very grateful for that. So I come from a background of competitive Pokemon, and the way it was structured. So I used to be on Smogon University. I was on the forums all the time. I was a writer on the forums. That was my first real foray into the internet, really. And the rule that they go by, it is impossible to objectively determine power. So we need to use another metric to do it. And in competitive Pokemon, a Pokemon's power is evaluated based on their usage. If they're being used a lot, then clearly something about it must be good. So if we go back to, let's say, and this is an aside for just a second here, going back to the Alchemist, if everyone's picking Bomber, I guess a better example here would be Bard. Everyone's picking Maestro. Clearly something must be good about it, which is why they're picking it all the time. So when I designed Ironclad, there were 3 subclasses that I had designed for. I designed Mobile Fortress, Perpetual Protector, and Armored Artificer. And they each had different things that they brought to the table. More defense, in the case of Mobile Fortress, mobility. In the case of Perpetual Protector, teamwork and utility. And then in the case of Armored Artificer, more defense. Intentionally, I ignored an offensive option when designing these subclasses, because I knew that everyone would just flock to it. Everyone would see, oh, this gives you more damage. Let's take that one, right? Unfortunately, one of my class feats, a fan favorite, mind you, kinda does that anyway, and that would be Phalanx Stance, which lets you hold a 2-handed reach weapon in one hand, as long as you're wearing a shield in your other hand, which is already something that you want to do. So for the cost of 1 damage per damage dice, this too can be your fighting style. And basically everyone I've met that has played an Ironclad immediately flocks to Phalanx Stance. So that is something to consider, when designing these things, that damage options are always going to be good. Anything that increases your damage will be good unless there is a major drawback associated with that ability. Power attack.
So what I'm hearing is that when we do another Ironclad update, we just straight up delete the feat from the PDF. Sean, get on that immediately.
Yeah. No, it'll be even greater. So if you have an original copy of the PDF, it's worth so much more now because you would have access to this busted feat that it just isn't going to be available ever again.
Okay, so let's say I am a relatively new writer into the space. I don't want to say like any particular names, but I know a lot of people are flocking to the let's say the Pathfinder Infinite server. We're both actually on there.
It's been blowing up.
I know. I've been really excited to just see some of the names that are on there. What is kind of your mindset going into designing the class? Once you got the theme down, what is kind of the I don't want to say motivation, but the drive, essentially?
I think the first thing that I started doing was using BCS. If you don't know what BCS is, it is a class creator tool created by Lazarus Dark. I forgot what it stands for, but it's really fucking good. And what it does is it assigns values to not just base proficiencies, but also your class features. Unfortunately, there is a bit of hit or miss with that sort of thing. The way class features are valued in the program that he made were a bit, dubious. I think that the way Paizo designed their classes, and I don't have access to this document because I'm who am I, right?
You're one of my best writers, sweetie. Here, all right, take your little candy.
and I wish I could see it. I wish I could just spend a day at Paizo just to see what they do when they design a class, because I know Lazarus Dark did a fantastic job of the BCS system, and I use it not necessarily as a Bible, but certainly a reference guide to check back and think about when I am doing class design. And what I saw in class design from other people, I've seen a bunch of different homebrews, is that they don't put a lot of thought into base proficiencies, and this goes both ways. I've seen insanely over budgeted base proficiencies. I've seen insanely under budgeted base proficiencies. I've seen a homebrew that was in the works that had legendary attack rolls, a saving throw, defenses, and a perception.
You haven't heard of the murder hobo class, where I am good at everything?
So yeah, I saw that and I'm like, how do you think that this is fair, right? And on the other hand, I've seen other classes with base HP 8 to get two master level saving throws, nothing in legendary, trained perception goes to expert, normalized attack rolls or normalized weapon proficiencies and armor proficiencies. And the class features are good, but when I look at this class, I'm like, these stats are so low, I'm just not going to want to play this because I'm going to feel underpowered. And what Lazarus first said was he really wished that the power budgets were a little bit more when he sees homebrew. So there's a baseline of this amount. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. So
yeah, go. Okay, just say don't. As long as I don't get in trouble.
Exactly. I don't want to be the first time on here and immediately reveal some trade secret, even though I've streamed this app. But I'm not the owner of dd8. I don't want to get.
You could say at least the number that they're trying to hit. I feel like that's a little fair.
So the number is 2100. Is it arbitrary? Maybe
a little bit.
But the way every class was normalized was that 2100 was this magic number that you had to hit. As it turns out, Ironclad hit it on the mark perfectly without any adjustments before this document was even released. This was peer reviewed. This was peer reviewed. I have the comment saved on my YouTube channel, so this person's not a paid actor either. So I can say with full 100% confidence that this is the most balanced class homebrewed by anybody, really, on Pathfinder Infinite.
The chutzpah on this one.
But to stop tooting my own horn here, the way I approached Ironclad was I wasn't really sure what feats or what class features to give it. I wasn't really sure past the initial protocol. Darn you, cleric, for stealing doctrine from me. The advanced protocol, and then interpose. So I gave them a couple of other features here and there. I gave them basically hefty hauler for free at level 1. Ooh. So exciting, right? And then I gave them deny advantage at 3rd level. Wow. What an amazing, what an interesting and varied ability that certainly hasn't been seen before. And then, the capstone at 19 where your interpose just gets better. But I definitely think if I spent, another month in the think tank, I would have gotten more. But as it stands, what I did was focus on their base stats, and I wanted to make sure that the base stats were good enough such that they would always be viable throughout 20 levels of play. And if you look closely, you will see that they have better base proficiencies than any first party class.
Mm-hmm.
They have better armor proficiencies than the barbarian. Everything else is equal. They have better perception and HP over the monk. Everything else is equal. right? They have better saving throws and HP as the champion. Everything else is equal, that sort of thing. But really, the places where I buffed the ironclad stats were in areas that wouldn't be easily able to be discerned as overpowered. So if I gave them like, oh, here's an ability that gives you plus 10 damage, whatever, that clearly is not gonna fly with the reviews. So by putting them in more defensive areas to really signal that this is a defensive class, get in the thick of things, and just eat damage for days while your other teammates are dealing the damage. I think that speaks volumes as to how a class, when homebrewed, can be good without necessarily being deemed as overpowered.
So, speaking as another Pathfinder 2nd Edition writer here,
Sure.
one thing that a class particularly has that I don't think a lot of people actually really get to talk about that often, I would love to hear your opinion on it, is there's always a drawback. So they're really, really good at fort saves, but their drawback is that they're not too great about reflex saving throws. Their will is moderately okay. It's pretty standard. I believe it's master at like 17th or 19th level.
Something like that.
Late in the game. Rogues have easily, one of the best reflex saving throws in the game here, but, they're going to have the trade-off of, like, a lesser fortitude saving throw, I don't think their perception is terrible, actually. I don't know. It's been a while.
Rogues have the best perception in the game.
Yeah, see, exactly. My point. This is my point. I haven't read a single Paizo book in forever. I'm kidding. But still, what is a particular drawback that you see when looking at, class design? Do you intentionally have one in mind, or do you just feel like it develops as time goes on?
I definitely think that some people, myself included, have an idea of what it should be at the beginning, but then as you keep writing and as you keep adding things, you get a better sense of where it ends up. So with the Ironclad, they have the same saving throws as the Barbarian. So they have excellent fort, decent will, and then crap reflex. However, this is mitigated by the fact that, the Ironclad is heavy armor. That means bulwark. So even though your dex is probably going to be not very good, you still have something to fall back on. But the Ironclad's biggest weakness is their lack of damage. They only have your standard damage progression. They don't get crit specialization on any of their weapons. And they don't have any resource that they can spend in order to have extra damage here. So you won't be dealing as much damage as a fighter or a barbarian or any class that gets a damage upgrade, such as ranger with precision, rogue with precision, investigator or swashbuckler with, again, precision. But you always have this reliable defense and a fat stack of hit points, so you're not going to be going anywhere. Give me 1 second. I gotta get some more water.
All right. Well, as Comatt's getting water, I kind of just want to talk about, a little bit more about the 2nd edition design of classes. As somebody who has written a few, I think it's never a bad idea to use other classes as a template. Meaning, a lot of spellcasters kind of follow the same route of the witch and wizard and sorcerer, all kind of mirroring the same base level proficiencies. And yeah, I was just talking about how I personally use classes as templates, because I've written 2 spellcasters with Witch Warper and Precog, and they both follow that sorcerer wizard track of like a very, very, I want to say garbage proficiencies, but they're kind of at that little bit of the garbage, not the greatest in terms of saving throws, not good at damage output, but like the trade-off is like they have a buttload of spell slots. And, that's their damage output, is like their spells. What do you think about using other classes as the template? Have you, when you let's say consulting Ironclad, did you take champion and barbarian as your quote-unquote templates and then kind of mix them matched? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely was referencing a lot of other classes just to see not just what they get, but when they get them. So Champion got their armor increases at 7, 13, and 17. I just copy and pasted that over. I might have changed the descriptions, like, the little flavor sense. It's like, because Champion's legendary, like, your deity gives you this. Well, Ironclad doesn't have one, so I gotta just, reflavor that a little bit. But other than that, it's like the same. With Barbarian, it was the same. It's just hit points, really. The Ironclad gets legendary fortitude saves 2 levels later, because I think giving them an armor increase, a weapon increase, and a save increase at all at the same level, that's a bit much. So I think spreading it out a bit was important to make sure that they were getting something at every level, but they weren't really, missing out on too much early, where, most of the games are being played. So having a bit of a front load, not too much, but like having a bit of early staying power is important. One of my players I managed to successfully bribe into playing in Ironclad. He's been hard to take down. I think I've only knocked him out once, which is low by my standards. If you aren't familiar, when I GM games, death says hi very often. We've even joked about me having a workplace accident.
Number of times it's new.
X days since a character death.
Yeah, that's absolutely something that I take into account kind of often, is seeing what other classes are kind of bringing to the table. And this is why I asked the question, are classes being too much in 2nd edition? Do you feel like with writing new classes, obviously we can't say anything behind the scenes of what's going on over with, the third party that you conveniently get to work with. I don't know who runs those guys, but fucking nerds.
Neither do I. It's still a mystery. They're just hiding behind the curtain.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
just eagerly awaiting their reveal.
What are your kind of thoughts on, as more people bring classes into 2nd edition? Are you seeing certain niches getting filled here, or are you worried that it's eventually going to get to the point where we're all kind of just repeating the same concept over and over and over again?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. My biggest problem is they're not giving them to me so I can see if they're balanced or not. But BCS takes care of that, so maybe my job there has been filled. But in any case, I see a bit of both. Like, I see things like, the ports. The ports are really good. The medium, the kineticist, the warlord. Those are all really, really good, and they all serve important roles. But on the same hand, there are 3 Inquisitors up on Pathfinder Infinite, and even though they're all doing separate things, you're going to see Inquisitor, and even though they're all the same thing, or even though they're all different things, you're going to think that there's going to be a lot of overlap between them just because of the name. And I do think there are a lot of, like, tiny holes that are being filled. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Tiny holes that are being filled, but I would like to see if a much larger hole could be filled. But unfortunately for us, Paizo is so good at their job that it's getting harder and harder with every waking moment. So kudos to them. They've done an excellent job, and this is why this is my favorite TTRPG system of all time.
Yeah, I agree.
Really just knocked it out of the ballpark.
Yeah, okay, so you say that it's getting more and more difficult to read Paizo, like what their next moves are. And that is 1000% true, as, we're getting later and later into the system, reaching year 4 in only a month or two.
It's only been 3, right? Or do you count the playtest?
I'm going to count the playtest in this case. So,
sure.
2018 to 2022, about 4 years of 2nd edition.
Okay, yeah, 4 years.
If you want to... right? Technically we're going to approach year 3 in a minute, of like 2nd edition, the course base being out. It's definitely gotten a lot harder to, kind of read the hand of Paizo. As we're getting more and more narrow, you mentioned the fact that, there are so many different takes on, the 3 takes on Inquisitor, but they're all doing different things. What is your approach in the sense that you're trying to create something unique? What is kind of stopping you from, continuing on with the porting? Even though, like, I love doing porting work. It's obviously one of my favorite pastimes to get to do. I don't know what company I do it for, but, it's one of them.
It's a mystery.
I never know what they're called. What is kind of your thoughts when, why don't you go to porting more classes? Obviously you could probably write another kineticist if you really wanted to. What's pushing you to do, Ironclad over, I don't know, a first edition class remotely similar, Slayer. Let's just call it Slayer then.
Okay, sure. I don't want to be stepping on the toes of others because I personally feel that it's a bit disingenuous, and no one has done this, and I don't think very many people will, but like, I don't want to be labeled as, oh, this guy ripped off this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
This person did this, and then this is like, you can copy my homework, just change it a little, right?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So when I want to make something, I want to bring something unique to the table. I made Inquisitor on a whim.
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to do it, as a fun project, and you were like, "Hey, let's make some money out of this."
Oh yeah. That's just me, just straight rolling in the $2 got the brand new Mercedes out back, just ready to go.
No, but you were like, "Hey, let's get this published," and I was like, "Okay." And then I started doing this more, and then I was like, "Hey, this is really fun," just dedicating all this effort to a project. And this was at a point in time where I had the time to, dedicate to making a full class. And I had so much time, I did it twice, right? So there were a lot of lessons that I learned from the Inquisitor because the reviews were mixed. The general consensus was, yeah, this person put a lot of time and effort into it, but there is a lot of refinement that needs to be made on this product. And I did make these refinements. The update to my Inquisitor are coming very soon. I think we're just at the end, and I just need a couple of formatting fixes and whatnot, and then we're good. Like, everything has been rebalanced. I took a look at a lot of the feats and abilities that people were calling a bit problematic, a bit overpowered. And then when I made Ironclad, I wanted to make sure that I didn't make these mistakes twice. And I do want to say that I succeeded in that regard. I don't think there's anything in here that people would immediately stop and say, that's too good, There are a lot of things that are in that book that are good, and I would know, because one of the biggest first world problems that I had was I was building an Ironclad for myself, and I was struggling with some of these feats. Like, oh, I really want Body Slam, but at the same time, I really want, Nimble Shield Hand or this or that. And I think that's one of the pinnacles of having a good design, is that the people that are playing this can't immediately spot a best in slot, ability that is like, okay, this is autopick, this is autopick, this is autopick.
Okay, so have you felt that Paizo moving forward? Obviously, we don't know what they're announcing at Gen Con.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate that we don't, because, obviously we deserve to know.
When is Gen Con?
First week in August, so roughly a month.
It's too far away, dude.
I know, right? I love you, Paizo, but come on, you're teasing me here. You're making me wait a whole other month. Do you think that Paizo, now that we've I think we're kind of ending the porting from first edition. Now, we got something unique with Inventor that hasn't been done in first edition. It was completely unique. And I think Thaumaturge is pretty divorced from the occultist origin of it all.
Absolutely. I consider it to be unique as well.
Do you think that Paizo is going to start moving it in more of the, here's a completely original concept? Or do you think they're going to go, they're going to slow down their second edition class, new classes, and, focus on other aspects of the game that just hasn't been fully utilized yet?
I definitely think Paizo's going for a quality over quantity approach this time, and I think that's a really good thing. Mm-hmm. I think if, they said that they're taking their foot off the gas when it comes to classes, and I think that's great. I think that if they spend a lot of more time fleshing out the rest of the world, the rest of what we already do have, and they've definitely been doing a good job of doing that too. But to say you're going to get 2 classes every year, one of them is going to be new, one of them is going to be old, or when we run out of old classes, they're both going to be new. Or even if it's just one class, I'd be perfectly fine with that if they just knock the ball out of the park. And for the most part, they have, with a couple of exceptions, them being any int-based class, but that's neither here nor there. But no, I mean, when it comes to classes, I'd rather them do what they're currently doing. We had we had the original 12 classes, then the APG came out. That was in 2020. That was a whole year, and we only got 4 new classes. And then last year we got 4 classes again. They were split up twice. There was Magus Summoner and Gunslinger and Venner. Now we're getting Thaumaturge and Psychic, and I don't see us. We're gonna get another playtest by the end of the year, but I don't think they're coming out this year.
Well, hold on. We've already gotten 2 classes earlier, semi-earlier in the year, though.
Was that this
wait,
year?
was Gunslinger and...
That was Gunslinger last year.
That was last year. Oh my god. God, this is why time is hard for me to track. You're right. We'd only gotten the Psychic and Thaumaturge this run around. So, do you feel that there is a particular class that should be either ported into 2nd edition, or something that you'd really, really like to see be a class in 2nd edition? Not that can't quite be an archetype just because the concept's too big, and so on and so forth.
I think if they made Warlord and expanded on Martial, and then just made that a full class, I think that would work a lot, because there's a lot of things that Martial does right. It's already a huge archetype. There's probably already 20 feats in there. There's just so much they could do with that style of play. And when I was talking with Archon about their Warlord, there were a lot of things that I really, really liked, especially with the orders. So you're spending actions. So for the uninitiated, a Warlord order is you spending an action to let your teammate immediately take a reaction. And I really enjoyed that because it definitely involved a lot of teamwork and a lot of strategy, positioning, that sort of thing. What I would have liked to see more of is giving them abilities which allow your teammates to take extra reaction. So say you spend an order, they can spend the reaction, but they get an extra reaction too. So they can still take maybe an attack of opportunity, but now they have an ability to stride up to an enemy such that they can take that attack of opportunity later on. And I think that opens up an entirely new avenue of play, because I definitely think that even though Pathfinder 2nd Edition is very much a team-centric or a party-centric game rather than, individual characters trying to break the game on their own accord, I think that there still is a lot of room left to introduce more teamwork-based abilities. And I know Deadly D8 has already done a video on the sniping duo, I believe.
Oh my god, I wonder who voiced that one too.
But I would love to see more abilities like that, more feats like that, and maybe even a class just dedicated to teamwork. Because I think that even though the Bard does a lot of that, I think that there's still much to be done and much to be discovered.
Yeah, I completely agree when it comes to the teamwork aspect. I won't say the name Sinclair's Library, but something along those lines. But you mentioned that teamwork is something that's actually vital to 2nd edition. Now, I've been going back and in my own free time, whenever little time I get of that, when I've been going back in the history of 2nd edition, seeing what people were asking for in the beginning versus like what we got to now. And a lot of common criticism of 2nd edition, I think this was really before it, like, people realized what 2nd edition could do, was a lot of their, my 6 levels in Paladin, and then 2 more in Oracle, and then, 5 more into Rogue. A lot of that was gone. And so what do you think about when initiating the teamwork side of a class? Because a lot of classes now in second edition rely on having other people there. Like some classes, like Bard, kind of shut down if there's no one else, to really inspire courage with. That's kind of like their gig. What is your like approach to actively thinking about teamwork, in a sense of thinking about not only Ironclad on the battlefield, but who else could be potentially there?
So going back to the initial concept again, it's the warlord, right? Someone that can just micromanage all these different parts of the game. And I there's a very funny comparison that I like to use. Is like, well, what if there was a game out there that was like D&D or like Pathfinder, but you could just be everyone at once? And that game is Fire Emblem. Let's be real here. Like your characters are even one note, personalities, so it goes hand in hand. No offense. But I think that tactical layer, even though it has been explored, I still think that there's more to it. And with the Ironclad, it opens up a very unique avenue of playstyle which hasn't been seen before, and that's a hard taunt. So enemies have to attack you, and now you can coordinate with your teammates saying, I'm going to get to this position, you stand next to me, and you don't need to worry about anything because I'll be there to protect you. I'll be there to take any damage that you would normally receive. And I have been working on a fourth subclass. I posted it very briefly. I'm not sure if I posted it in one of the Discords, but it's about being able to intercept magical abilities as well.
So from what I'm understanding is that because the way the second edition is kind of structured, where it's a lot of coordination with your parties. Because I've had times where I've gone, oh no, if you go like right behind them, I can get flanking. Oh, I know because I'm a gunslinger. I'm gonna crit with fatal. Like whatever. I think I was with like a shotgun, so I didn't have fatal. But like my point being in a broader stance here of a lot more coordination. Do you find when looking back on, first edition, 3.5, or even just seeing other, non-Pathfinder-y based games, what do you see when a lot of these are going more with the original style approach game of everyone is, like their own individual badass? They're not really like, hey, if you stride right there, I could get, sneak attack or whatever, and so on and so forth.
So I think that in Pathfinder, we have this concept that every bonus that you get matters. Because the math is so tight, you're not going to see these bonuses. In Pathfinder First Edition, there's this very nice spreadsheet, and it's called bench pressing by the numbers. It's like, these are the numbers that you have to hit if you just want to hit on a 2 all the time. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So now when I'm building a character, now I have to min-max, and now I have to hit all these benchmarks, yada, yada, yada. But because of how second edition works, I already know that I'm at the max attack bonus. There's nowhere more to get. So now the next layer for me is saying, okay, now I got to flank. Now I got to demoralize. Now I got to, use Inspire Courage at the right time. That sort of thing. And that's what I'm doing with my players in the game that I'm GMing as well. When I play with them, when I GM for them, I want them at their best, because they're gonna die if they're not. So I always tell them, this is not, and I'm not your adversary. If you want the best tactical advice, just ask me. I'll give it to you. I'll say, hey, you should do this. You should get into flanking. You should intimidate before you cast the spell, because now you have an extra chance of hitting if you land the intimidate. That sort of thing. It's very minor, but all of these minor optimizations do add up in the end.
All right, because we're getting kind of short on time here. What is kind of like the main takeaway you think that people should get away from, this? Like, let's just say for some reason somebody skipped to this exact moment in the video and ignored every other bit of advice that was given today. What is kind of the go home with knowledge, I would say?
Teamwork makes the dream work, and the Ironclad is excellent at teamwork. So
I can at least endorse the first part, as dd8. The second half I endorse as James. But yeah, I think that teamwork is something that has often been underutilized in a lot of other systems. There are still games that I haven't played, to be fully honest. Like I read a lot of Starfinder. I haven't played Starfinder, so I can't make a lot of snap decisions. So if there's like one niche TTRPG out there, chat, and you go, oh, what about Monster of the Week? That one's all teamwork. I'm just like, yeah, I'm sorry, then I forgot about that game, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't played it yet.
Because I know a bunch of my friends that roll the roll. They play Monster with me. I think they might be playing it right now, actually. And if that's a team where they've been trying to get me into it, I'm like, I'm not going to play it just because it's not Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Not everything could be the god set. Budget, so. Yeah, not everything could be the god set 2E. There's something about that system that always gets me back. But yeah, I think just something as kind of a developer in this space, is somebody who manages a lot of, projects. A lot of common things that I often see is just pitfalls, is a lot of not believing in oneself when it comes to design space. And I don't mean like it's more of I don't believe that my class is good. It's like I'm too afraid of maybe taking a risk with, a class feature or something. And something I often tell people is go find a community that is willing to, be open and honest with you. I've had conversations with Comatt where I've sent you a class feature of something I was working on. I was like, hey, is this cool? And you're just like, do you want my honest opinion, or do you really want me to like hold your hand on this one? It's been a lot of like, give me your honest opinion here. But I think that's kind of the best way, as not only as a community to really come together, but just as a writer, even if you're just doing this for fun. Like, we all started off with, here's a random thing I wrote for funsies, and like now I work up for Deadly D8 and the Pathfinder channel. But I think that's kind of like the most important advice I could probably give to anyone who's wanting to either write or learn more. Just find a community out there. You can either go to the Deadly D8 server, it's down there in the layout and also in the description. But find someone to talk with. I mean, that's how, I've formed a company with. It was just by knowing some cool people who were willing to deal with me for a little bit. But as we start transitioning out, where can people find you? And all that fun social plugs.
Yeah, so twitter.com/comatthew6, twitch.tv/comatt6. If you go there, you'll also find my Discord. There's not really a lot of Pathfinder stuff there because I only have like 6 people in the server that play Pathfinder, but you can find me around in most Pathfinder Discords. If you ever want to talk to me about anything, feel free to just hit me up. I usually have time to give my feedback about anything, and I just love talking about Pathfinder. You start talking to me about Pathfinder, I can go on forever if my throat permits. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm pretty available. I do have a job, but other than that, my weekends are usually free. I don't have any other responsibilities really, so yeah, hit me up.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is giving you more work.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That big project that you're working on. I feel like, taking on a second version of that project, really get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, just double the amount of things that I've written already.
Yeah, go from a 30-page minimum to like 100-page minimum. You got this. It's fine. But thank you so much for being on here. I mean,
Thank you for having me. This is the first time I've ever done something like this. So
I know, it's really so cool excited. You're somebody who I've always really wanted to talk to, as, like I said, at the beginning of the stream, you're kind of my go-to person for when I need a particular class thing looked at. I mean, obviously I'm lucky enough to have a group of developers who, all know what they're talking about, so I can really
bug any of them. Awesome team.
Oh, I know, so cool. I'm so glad to be in, that I formed it. And, I don't want to do a lot of backpacking on that one, but, I love everyone I work with. But for those who are not in EOG, thank you so much for watching Deadly D8 Live. It has been an absolute pleasure to have Matt come on here and get to talk with him and get a very unique perspective into 2nd edition, and honestly, opening my eyes to a few things that I probably went wrong in a few of my own writing that I've done. But yeah, if you liked this, obviously like and comment, subscribe, all that fun YouTube algorithm stuff. I know no one
It's
likes saying
free.
it. It is free
Doesn't
though.
cost you a thing.
But you know what can save you money? World Anvil. I forgot to plug it at the beginning, so you're going to get plugged it now. World Anvil is an online interactive tool for all the great things that comes with GMing, whether it is world creation, world management, timelines, maps, anything that you really need. World Anvil kind of has it all. If you use code dd8 at checkout, you can get 40% off a 12-month subscription. I was about to say 12% off a 40-month subscription. I thought that would be a little insane. Then I really get in trouble with World Anvil. But check it out. I seriously cannot recommend it. Every time I come on the stream, I genuinely mean it. It's a great tool. I was using it pre-sponsor. It is 1000% worth it in my opinion, and I'm just so glad to have them around the channel. Stick around for more Deadly D8 content. We're releasing Pride stuff for Pride Month. Every day has been a new Pathfinder person from Galarian who is a member of the LGBT. I'm super glad to, not only see Pride representation in Pathfinder, but, have Deadly D8 just so openly endorse it. It has been an absolute pleasure getting work with Victoria and Eli and all that. But yeah, if you like what you see here, we have a playlist full more of Deadly D8 live content where you can check out other cool creators such as Improfit, who's here last week and gave some great advice on bloat and all that fun stuff. And with that, I think that is all my announcements. I'm not sure if I have any more, and if I missed any, oopsie, I can't do anything else about that. But I know today, in particular, for those of us in the States, was really hard for a lot of us. So I'm really glad that we can, come together as a community, really spread some light and joy. I know talking about TTRPGs is probably not what everyone's on their mind right now, but having a little bit of time to just de-stress from the world was an absolute, blessing to have. So for those who are particularly scared right now, just try to stay positive, I guess. I know the time being what it is. I'm not going to make too many political statements here just because I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble or not. I doubt it, but still. But yeah, everyone have a great day, night, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you next time on Deadly D8 Live. See ya!